What is up, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Meadows and Makers podcast, brought to you here on MSP Waves. Right now, I have successfully worked out how to stream both here and to YouTube on my channel on YouTube using a new plugin that somebody developed for OBS. And so I got that figured out. So I'm both streaming to the normal location and to YouTube. So just figured that out tonight. So got that going on. If you guys want to help me share this around with folks, throw them over to my YouTube channel if you want to share that link around. I'm actually going to tweet it out right now to share the live stream with some other folks. If I can get my link to share the live stream. Let's see. All right. Let's see if I can do that. And let me throw out a message real quick. Just don't do that. Just kicked on my live stream. Come check it out. All right. And here. Let's see. At mspwaves.com/watch. All right. That too. All right. Cool. All right, guys. Well, welcome to another week of the podcast. My Twitter is Greg Makes Stuff at Greg Makes Stuff on Twitter. Greg Makes Stuff, and I think it's with 2 S's. Is that how you say it? Greg Makes Stuff. Yep, that's what it is. Greg Makes Stuff with the 2 S's. So that's what it be, and that's what it do. And all right. So I was able to figure that out. It's not too hard to figure out how to do this multiple streaming thing. So that's my Twitter handle. And it's just going into and finding this release for the OBS plugin, which you guys can find here. I can drop the link here in the chat. And if you want to set this up for yourself, then if you're on the Windows computer, all you got to do is run the OBS multi RMTP setup.exe for Windows. And then if you've already got OBS set up, and it just adds the plugin to your OBS. So, and then you gotta just kind of look through your settings and make sure that, like, if you're depending on what platforms you're streaming to or whatever, that you're not bogging down your CPU. So right now I got my task manager going, and I'm just checking out what's going on with my Ethernet and what's going on with the computer and everything. So far it looks good, and it looks pretty easy to set up. After you get it set up there, it just gives you like a little output thing that says multiple output. Then you just grab your URL for where you're going to stream, and then the stream key for that, and then you can add it into the little plugin. And then once you start your primary stream, it's going to stream to that primary location. And then it looks like it will blast it out to the secondary locations that you have set up, and then you just click start on the plugin, and it gets you going. So, kind of happy I figured that out. We'll see how it goes tonight, and I will probably be doing live streams this way, you know, for the continue into the future here. So, just to get it out there to more people, and I don't have to go back and like do editing and stuff too. So the live stream will be out there. Still gonna grab a recording on my end, but yeah, guys, welcome to the show. Tonight I wanted to catch you guys up a little bit in the beginning here on what I've been up to, and so over the weekend I got to hang out with another one of our members of our Freedom Cell group, and we did a get shit done weekend. And he was working on a pond, so he had to fix a leak in his pond, and so he had to drain it all. So he got some excavator equipment to pull out this dam that was leaking, section of the dam, and all the fish spilled out of it. And so our job was to get there and help rescue as many fish as we could. And then we were able to take some catfish away that were saved, but now got taken for a meal. So it was kind of multi-purpose. I was able to show some of the other folks in the group how to fillet a catfish. It was their first time ever trying to fillet a catfish, and so I learned some things. I learned that I need a better knife for filleting, and so it led me to looking for a nice set of butchering and fish filleting knives. And so I went to ask my buddy about it because he's been doing this stuff for a while. So I basically, he set me up with this set of Victorinox knives, and they're relatively cheap for being pretty good quality knives. So something like this kit is what I'm buying. I didn't order the little bag or anything, but basically got all the basic knives that you see there in that kit. And it was just one of those things where, yeah, I keep having to borrow my dad's stuff for going to do this, and it's about time I should have my own stuff. So as far as knives go and all that, so Victorinox. So I will probably, my buddy gave me a good idea, is to do a series of videos on butchering, and then kind of show the knives and how they perform, and kind of do a review on all of them, on the knives I picked up from these guys. So that's what I was up to over the weekend, as well as one of the stops that we took on the way back from helping out with the pond project was by this shop that sells Kratom products. I didn't know a whole lot about Kratom. I had taken Kratom before and didn't really see very much effects to the Kratom and what it was actually doing. But I wanted to try it out because I'm currently on day 2 of cold turkey. I quit smoking. I had quit smoking for a long time, and then I picked it up again right around the COVIDs, and right around when the pandemic started. And so now I'm at a point where I'm looking to quit again. I just want to quit smoking again. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can ease the nicotine withdrawals from from quitting smoking, and so I wanted to I wanted to see maybe if kratom was something that would could help with that. So Mick Mommy, oh, and Gabriel, what's up? Rondon, good to see y'all. Good to see everybody. Breezing. So Breeze, kratom was a bad experience for you. So let me tell you guys what I've experienced. Oh, nice. As for Victorinox, I'm at a point where I refuse to cook if I can't find my Victorinox knives. Nice. Yeah, so that's a good endorsement for them. So, all right. So let me tell you the experience I've had with kratom so far. I can see where kratom was one of the worst experiences of your life because I took some the other day. Don't really know the dosages on this stuff, but anyway, they said that the stuff that they were selling me was like for mood and relaxation and all that kind of stuff. Well, it'll definitely, I guess, help you relax, but I took some on an empty stomach before work, and it was like, it makes you want to fall asleep, basically, is what I felt like. I was sweating like crazy, and kind of generally felt a little bit out of it, and almost wanted to throw up. So I don't know. I guess there's different strains of the kratom, and it's how you do your dose, and what they told me on how to take this stuff. It comes in a powder form, and you just take a scoop of the powder, and you put it in your mouth, and you wash it down with some water, and then just kind of swish it around in your mouth and do all that. And that's how you take the stuff. Well, I don't quite know the dosages yet, and probably would not recommend if you have some like strenuous work to do. At least taking like a pretty big dose, and it was not that great of an experience. I'll tell you that. Like, it was a little. It is a little rough on you. And today, after I got back home, I just felt like totally drained. So anyway, so I got the nicotine withdrawals going on, and everything people say to me, I'm like pissed off at. So I have also to like try to lessen the anger. I've been on a media fast for maybe like since last podcast. I've been trying to stay away from the news and all that kind of stuff in the media, and limit my screen time. I've pretty much just been turning on Pandora and listening to the radio while I go to work. So like I haven't really been keeping up with what's been going on in the world. And yeah, so to fight the nicotine withdrawals, just so that I don't want to rip somebody's face off, I'm just trying to number one, work out. I'm trying to work out in the morning. I've been doing more and more push-ups to try to get some extra energy out. Yeah, look, okay, yeah. So Breezy had a similar experience: sweating, anxious, nauseous, all of it. Yeah. Oh man, well I definitely got the sweating. I felt like I wanted to throw up too. Yeah, I don't know what the dosage is, but yeah, it does mess with the body. They were telling me that kratom affects the same receptors as like opioid receptors. So anyway, I thought it would be a good thing for maybe curbing nicotine withdrawals. Maybe not so much. maybe I just gotta do some more exercises and stuff. And maybe if I want to take kratom at the end of the day or something like that, if I've got like a real bad craving, maybe I'll do something like that. But here's something I also did. I also ordered one of these little fume things. Um, a lot of the guys in that, like Michael Malice was one of the guys talking about this. But it's one of those uh, things that it's got essential oil cartridges in it. And so I'm going to give that a try as well and see how that goes. That's supposed to come in soon. So yeah, I could see that helping out with that kind of stuff. Definitely probably not to quit smoking. But yeah, this stuff's pretty it is pretty intense, and it does do a little bit of work on your body. So kratom, yeah. If I guess if you are struggling with alcoholism, it might be helpful for that. And what Gabriel's saying, opiate addiction, might be helpful for that. But yeah, I don't know. That's my experiences with the kratom so far. But guys, I've been working on the carnivore diet, and it looks like I weighed myself the other day, and I just got under 280 pounds for like the first time in a long time, and so I was really happy about that. And I'm sticking to the carnivore diet, staying away from sugars, and being as serious as I can be on that. Even though for lunch today at work they brought in pizza, so they bought everybody lunch and they got pizza. So I had some pizza, so I got away from it there. But other than that, just been staying away from sugary drinks. Only been eating like eggs, some dairy, and meat for the most part. And it looks like it's working for me. I've been trying to up my exercise just kind of for number one, to try to help with those nicotine withdrawal cravings. And I'm only on day 2. I've done this previously, going cold turkey, and it usually takes about up to 3 weeks to like kick it and not want to have a smoke. And so wish me luck. I might want to murder somebody in the next few days, but hopefully this little fume thing comes in. Maybe that'll help me out a little bit. I'll continue the exercising and working out and all that kind of stuff to see if that helps as well. But yeah, hey, share that link around with folks. Let me see with your social meds, everybody, so that maybe we can get some folks checking out the live stream. Right now, I just figured out how to do to multi-stream to MSP Waves and to YouTube right now. So there's the YouTube link if you guys want to share that around. So I've got that figured out. The next step, I'm gonna throw in the Odyssey live stream in there, and then maybe get on. Maybe try some of the other guys like Vim and Rumble and I don't know, some of those other platforms as well, and try to get him out on more platforms. But pretty happy that I got that figured out. I mean, it's just the first time trying the stream out. It should be live there. If somebody wants to go to that link and tell me if everything looks like it's running good on there, that would be awesome too. Yeah, it definitely keeps the feelings less intense if you eat something. If you go totally on an empty stomach, man, it gets crazy. Yeah. Uh, you get nauseous sweats with pain pills if I don't eat. Yeah, I guess it's the same receptors as the pain receptors in the body. So, uh, so yeah, that's what I was doing. I was like sweating real bad and like really hot, even though the temperature was like super low. So anyway, uh, learned my lesson with kratom and figured out what you gotta do for that. But I'm just trying to figure out something to just help me get over the curb with smoking because I really want to kick that. Okay. So yeah, that's what's been going on with me. Still looking to. I am selling my 3D printer as well, and that is going to a buddy of mine, and I'm gonna get an upgrade. And I'm gonna upgrade to this guy. This it's called a Snap Maker 2.0. It's like a modular 3D printer. It's got all the things really, and it's got like a laser engraving module and a CNC milling module so that you can mill like little desktop stuff. And let me show you guys. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. You can check it out right here. Bam. So I'm gonna upgrade to this guy, and do some custom laser engraving and stuff. So, oh man, yeah, yeah, it's definitely interesting. Oh, ah. But if you're gonna try kratom, definitely don't take a huge amount of it. Like and have something to eat, like Rondon said. Like take some food, take some food along with it. If you're gonna try the kratom, at least from what I experienced there, it's probably a good idea to do that. So here's an article that I just ran across that I thought was kind of interesting. Um, Covering it from Zero Hedge here, but they're talking about how the used car market, the prices on used cars it looks like it's dropped somewhat. They're saying from April of 2020. So I'm wondering like if there's so few amount of people that can drive stick shifts anymore. Like, are used stick shift vehicles going to become like super cheap? And then if everybody is switching over to electric cars, then our internal combustion car is going to be super cheap. But I mean, who can afford an electric vehicle? I mean, these things are like the price of a small house. Like I remember, buying this little house I had in Huntsville, and like I think it costs about as much as one of these electric cars they're saying is out there right now, like $50,000-$60,000. So it's like, wow, what is who can really afford one of those? Like, yeah, you gotta have like four people share a Tesla or something. I think that's what they want, right? It's like, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So you rent a share in somebody's electric car or something like that that's connected to somebody's solar power system or whatever. Something like that. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just like now they have all these Delta 8, Delta 9 gummies that you can buy too. So it's like a legal loophole. It's 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 just it's THC. It's like edible THC. It's just a loophole in the law for, I think it's derived from hemp or whatever, and you get around it being classified as a marijuana. And so, anyway, those are sold at like every gas station in Alabama, and it seems to be anyway that they popped up all over the place. Cannabis, a lot of this stuff. It's the plant is illegal currently on the books, but you can get all the different derivatives of it, and that do pretty much the same thing to you. So it's pretty crazy. But yeah, unless you want to get kicked in the teeth and feel like kind of feel kind of crappy for like 3 or 4 hours. Maybe kratom's not the greatest solution, especially for trying to quit cigarettes. Maybe it would work if you're trying to quit alcohol or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, used cars. Let's. I kind of wanted to check out this article here, talking about used cars dropping back down. Looks like they were like pretty much on a roar from like 2019 moving into 2020. The used car prices are going crazy, as far as this graph is showing. All right, let's check this out. In April, while wholesale used vehicle values were at record highs, we asked, are used car prices about to peak for real this time? We pointed out 1 month later, used car prices are crashing at a near record pace. The latest Manheim used vehicle value index that tracks what dealers pay for used cars at auction is at a 1-year low of 211.6, which is, I don't know what that means. The index declined 3.6% from July in the first 15 days of August, but is still up 8.8% from August 2021. The monthly slump was the most significant drop since April of 2020. Cox automotive analysts say sliding wholesale used vehicle values should continue through August. SUVs and pickups saw the most decline in value at auctions, while minivans fell less. Likely a function of thin supply, according to analysts. They said compact cars saw auction prices stable, noting it was likely due to more demand because elevated fuel costs have pushed consumers to more efficient vehicles. A metric called days of inventory, how long it would take dealers to sell out of cars at the current sales rate if they couldn't acquire new stock, was 8 days higher than a year ago, as the nationwide supply of used vehicles as of August 15th was improving. Cox analyst noted consumers' views of buying conditions for vehicles declined in August due to elevated prices and soaring rising interest rates. They said the only prior time consumers felt this pessimistic about purchasing a car was when auto loan interest rates were sky high in the early 1980s. Looking at bank rate data, rising auto loans for used vehicles may have been enough to crimp demand as used car price growth on a yearly basis has cooled since rates began surging in the first quarter. Perhaps with supply rising and affordability woes mounting, we may have correctly called the peak in used car prices between April and May timeframe. What comes next with a uber hawkish Federal Reserve is possibly the implosion of the car bubble that could leave millions of Americans who bought the pandemic peak underwater. Just wait until these youngsters with $1,000 plus monthly payments panic sell their vehicles as the economy craters. The car market is in a very big ugly bubble at D Martino booth. Just did a great episode covering the topic, but the payments people have are unreal. How did it become normal for people to have payments in excess of $1,000 a month? Sounds like rents, not car payments. Yeah, that is freaking ridiculous. It's anyone's guess where the used car floor price is as supply returns and the Fed crushes demands with rising interest rates. Crazy. $1,000 a month for a car payment. That's for used car. That's crazy. It's like, yeah, just get a mortgage, or I hope you bought a car big enough that you could live in, and turn it into, I don't know, like a school bus conversion or something like that. Speaking of that, we do have somebody that's in our group that is working on a school bus conversion for an RV, and might have some pictures of working on that with them coming up. Apparently, she's going to film it and start a social media based on building the school bus. So whenever I get that, I will share that with everybody, as that'll be a pretty cool project. I think they're gonna do it up pretty big too. They're gonna put an energy system on board and all the other cool stuff, all that stuff. So have any of you guys out there, tried to quit smoking, or were former smokers, or reformed smokers or something like that? I mean, I have quit in the past, and it was a rough like 3 weeks is what I remembered. It was I just wanted to like hurt people. Whenever anybody asked me questions. Oh man, you were mixing. Last time you were serious about it, you were mixing Mullen 50-50 with your rolling tobacco. What's that? I've never heard about Mullen. Let me see. What is that? Control C. I do this thing where whatever I'm gonna type or the actions I'm doing on my keyboard, I just tell you. So it's like an herb. The mullein leaf. Okay. Good for your lungs. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna try this little fume device out. I know, I know I can do it. I just gotta go cold turkey. But maybe something like that will kind of help me with when the cravings hit every now and then. So far so good. Like I said, it's only 2 days in. But I'd like to check in next week with you guys and say that I've been going strong. So Um, that's my goal. I'm gonna stick to that. All right. So, uh, that kind of catches you guys up on everything that I've been working on. One of the things that what do you guys think I should do with the I was thinking I think I've already told you guys a little bit about this on the so I was smoking tobacco and cigars like Black and Milds and inhaling them. So yeah, Black and Milds, which is really bad. There's no filter. No filter. Just straight up tobacco and tar crap entering your lungs. Not so good. And there's got to be a lot of nicotine in those some bitches because um I remember not smoking one for a few days and then picking one up and smoking it, and it's like, damn, it gave me a really crazy buzz. So had to they have to have a ton of nicotine in them, so it's gonna be a little bit of a chore. I see Crimson Cloud's hanging out there in the audience. Just wanted to let you know that I figured out how to do the OBS multi-stream thing, and it's not too hard to set up. It's just a little plug-in that you run on OBS, and I think all you got to really worry about, I guess, is if you have a computer that can kind of handle the output of everything. But so far, it looks like what I got going on is working pretty good. So just let you guys know about that. I stopped listening to the Gulag Archipelago audiobook, so I haven't made it all the way through that. But I'll tell you what I did find. I did find a really cool YouTube channel, and it's not going to be under this one because it's under my YouTube that I stream with, but let me see if I can remember. See, Gore. It was an interview with this guy, Gore Vidal, and it was on like a C-SPAN. It was like a C-SPAN recording, but this Gore Vidal guy. Oh yeah, Book TV C-SPAN. The name of the channel is The Memory Hole. So let me see if I can pull this up, and let me subscribe to that on my channel. Control C, and throw this in here for you guys. The Memory Hole. They've got like some really good. He's got some really good videos on here, and this latest one where it was the C-SPAN recording of Gore Vidal talking about a lot of the American history going kind of back to the founding of the country. I thought was really interesting, and it's a long interview. It's like 3 hours long, but he does get into some interesting stuff there. I guess Gore Vidal is related to Al Gore, and he talks about how a lot of the families are related in some way or another, and he takes that back to when people came to the country originally, that there weren't a whole lot of people in the, on the uh, mainland of the United States. So the families were uh, there weren't too many elite families, let's say.
Weekend.
So let me fast forward this a little bit and maybe play it on double speed for you guys. But he said some interesting stuff, especially about Abraham Lincoln. Some interesting stuff about him. So let me see. In the beginning, they kind of go through a lot of his background, but apparently, what he did was he wrote a lot of historical biographies and wrote a lot of history, but he put fictional characters into the novels. So let me share this interview in particular. I thought was really interesting with you guys. Yeah, you guys probably have heard of him. Um, you guys have probably read some of his stuff before. Yeah, well known writer. Uh, oh yeah. Okay, he was gay. Okay, well, he's definitely an interesting dude, and I had never run into him before, but apparently he was like really big on history, and so I wanted to play part of this for you guys. Uh, Kind of some of his going down the rabbit hole stuff of American history. So I'm gonna start it from here. We'll see if this is kind of the more interesting section.
Northeast China and Manchuria. And it was then the richest piece of territory on Earth. It had iron, it had coal. It was very, very rich for the kind of technology that they needed then. The Japanese had their eye on it. The United States had their eye on it. Germany was even beginning to come and, slither around in the neighborhood. So that is empire. We are now launched as a military power. We had promised the Filipinos that we would liberate them from Spain and they could organize their own government. Once we saw the value of the possession of the Philippines, we went back on it and we refused to remove ourselves, and we took over the government of the Philippines. That caused a civil war in which something like 100,000 Filipinos were killed, men, women, and children. We went slaughtering. Not long after, a major general with a charge of the Marine Corps called Smedley Butler wrote a book. And he was commandant during the early part of the century, 1920s up to the 1930s. And he said, I was essentially an enforcer for the banks as commander of the Marine Corps. He said, I was making Nicaragua safe for Standard Oil. I was making Shanghai, we invaded Shanghai, safe for City National Bank or whatever the bank was called.
Hell yeah, man! That is some truth right there. Is that the military just gets used as ways to help out all these big corporations and make it safe for them to come in and extract resources from different countries and all that kind of stuff. Another really good book, and I believe he's describing the book War is a Racket that was written um, by General Smedley Butler. So let me see. Anti-War Classic by America's Most Decorated Soldier. 81 pages. That can't be it. 2013, 2003. War is a Racket. 1935 is probably the original publication. It is in an EPUB format. Looks like there's a more updated version in a PDF format. And let's see if I can grab this off of LibGen real quick. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm gonna do. Where's the racket? Grabbing that one off of there. So let's continue.
All that. And he named all of the great entities, commercial entities that he was working for, even though he was the United States government. And he said, I was the hitman. I was the enforcer for these banks and these corporations. He said, you know, I operated in 3 continents. Al Capone only had 3 Chicago districts. This is not in the history books, and that's why I write these books, to remind people through a form of a novel what was actually said and done, and what has been suppressed.
Next call for you is from Buffalo. Buffalo, you're on the air. Let's try Buffalo again. All right, I think we might have lost them. The last in the series before the Golden Age, Hollywood?
Hollywood. Somebody asked me, what is it about? I said, well, Hollywood is about Woodrow Wilson and Warren G. Harding. Their presidencies I studied, but I also, there's a great deal about the silent days of the movies. One of the figures that runs through the last 2 or 3 novels is William Randolph Hearst, who was a very important figure. Not only did he invent tabloid journalism, but if there was no news, he would invent it, which then puts the whole question, what is history, on the table. If the historian goes back to old newspapers to reconstruct an administration, and that's been faked, how's he to know? What is history? And the very end of the Golden Age, there's a whole meditation on the nature of history. Is anything real? So with Hollywood, what I'm doing is I show the silent days of the movies, all of Chaplin and so on. It's kind of fun. But you also see the influence of, first of government, Woodrow Wilson on Hollywood at the time of the First World War. He sent a guy called George Creel out there. George Creel was to organize propaganda movies, The Huns from Hell, stuff like that. And they did a lot of propaganda. Wilson appeared in at least 2 movies as himself, you know, with great sententious thoughts. And suddenly Washington realized the importance of Hollywood. And Hollywood realized that Washington was a very interesting partner. They talked today about Hollywood and, you know, as though this was something new and bizarre. Well, it's been going on since 1914, that symbiosis. Then I go into Woodrow Wilson, the first.
The year after they passed the Federal Reserve Act in the United States. So you got this, you know, kind of intertwining with D.C. and Hollywood. After they got unlimited money they can create from the Federal Reserve. I mean, it just started there in 1913. But yeah, interesting developments after that.
For the disaster of the League of Nations. And Warren Harding, who was probably our nicest president. He really was a very good man, surrounded by very corrupt people.
Next call, Yonkers, New York.
Yes, hello, thanks for having me on the air. I wanted to ask Mr. Vidal if you could talk a little bit about the actual process that you have to turn materials that you've acquired in your historical novels and transform them into a narrative form. The actual process by which you compile the bulk of the research material that you gather and transform it, put it into a creative narrative format.
It's a matter of reading, and I read, I'll read 100, 200, 300 books. Sometimes before I will start, I have to own the book so I can write in the margins. And as you read, you begin to see relationships between people. That helps you with your characters. Then you begin to find things that have been omitted in the official histories. And you begin to wonder why. Why has it been left out? Why is General Smedley Butler forgotten when he made such a startling, gave such a startling worldview of our activities? It's a matter of taking a lot of notes. I was helped in this series because I'm working with one family. So I know them, and now I start with one generation, second generation, third generation. I think I've got 4 generations in there. So I'm at home with the family. I know, and they're the fictional ones. The real ones are all interrelated, which is a curious thing that I found doing American history. That it's a very small deck of cards that governs the United States. Occasionally a new card is added, and some old cards are thrown out, but it's always pretty limited, the players. And you see how from administration to administration, there they are. For the first 40 years of our history, 50 years, it was pretty much Virginians, all of whom knew each other, except for the 2 Adamses who came in and each got to heave-ho from the Virginians. They didn't want anybody from Boston in the White House. You begin to see these patterns. And of course the reading, I mean, I have the luxury of taking all the best stuff from other historians. I just lift it and transform it, and then I put my fictional characters together with the real people. And it's the reason for the fictional characters is that they can observe and have opinions, which I as author must not. And I can't pretend that I know what goes on in Abraham Lincoln's mind, but I can tell you what one of my invented characters thinks of him. And if there's a contradiction in Lincoln, I can have another invented character. No, I don't think that's what he meant at all. So this gives me the luxury to comment on what I'm doing. And then the historical novel, as I practice it, is essentially it's history. It's like a libretto. And the fictional characters are the music. So you might say, in a sense, these are sort of operas, that the music starts and these are the fictional characters. And then we go through the familiar story of Abraham Lincoln goes to Ford Theater. And we know the plot, as we always know the plot of Julius Caesar or Aida. And then we have the fictional characters observing what happens with pity or with awe.
When you speak of the small deck of cards, in fact, you are an example of the interconnectedness of the power in America.
Oh, my heavens, yes. Well, a lot of that is because my mother's family, the Gores, were Anglo-Irish from County Donegal who came over in the 17th century. Well, those of us in the South who came from the British Isles in the 17th, 18th centuries, I think we're all related. There are so few of us, you know, that we intermarried. Not only, I've never said it until now, I don't think, that in addition to the Gore family and my cousinage with Albert Jr., oh God, I tremble to think that I'm going to say this. I get a lot of mail, you know, from people who are relatives, particularly from the South, because they know everybody's connections. I am a fifth cousin, twice removed. I don't know what twice removed means, except I think by election and defeat maybe is what is meant, of Jimmy Carter. Now you know it. You know the worst. Jimmy Carter. He had a grandmother, I think, who was a K from South Carolina. And my grandmother, who really raised me, Mrs. T.P. Gore, was born Nina K from a South Carolina family. And I'm told that this was a favorite relative of Carter, was the K, and she was certainly my favorite one.
So, Kennedy administration, Jackie?
She and I had the same stepfather.
Jimmy
Hugh Auchincloss, we finished with Hugh Auchincloss, who was descended on his mother's side from an uncle of Aaron Burr. And he had a painting of Theodosia, rather his.
I think it's interesting him talking about how a lot of these guys are all interrelated to each other. It's that's definitely an interesting fact. See, Gabriel, you're saying I want to find out more about Captain William Morgan. Illustrations of Freemasonry. Controversial and fully illustrated book forms a cornerstone of the mythology surrounding anti-Freemasonry. Captain William Morgan was a disenchanted Freemason based in Botvia, New York. After he was ejected by the local lodge, he announced he would publish a book exposing the secretive, organization. And Gabriel just posted a Gutenberg.org ebook about the mysteries of Freemasonry by William Morgan. So that sounds pretty interesting to me as well. So this is pretty cool. Project Gutenberg. Kindle, EPUB with images. You can read the book online. Let's see. Send to Dropbox. Send to other stuff. Can I just download it? EPUB with images. More files. What kind of files you got there? Okay. Cool. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bookmark that so I don't forget about it. I'm going to leave it up for now, and then I'm going to find the best thing about to read about it. Illustrations Freemasonry. Illustrations of Freemasonry. Yeah, I know Freemasonry had a part in the forming of the country. I also know that, reading some other revisionist history, that in the start of the country, there were a lot of the folks that did not want to form a strong centralized government. They wanted to remain as Articles of Confederation. And it was kind of a hijacking of the meeting that led to the guys that wanted a more centralized form of government. They were the ones that kind of took over and started drafting the Constitution, how to lay all the rules out for how this centralized government would work. So even since the founding of the country, there's it's not been really above board and open for everyone to see what the true nature of the founding was. So that's stuff that we don't get told, when we read about history and get brought up in the education system. And that's got to be one of the number one things that will change things in the world, I believe, is just a trend of looking into information for yourself and not relying on others to give you information, and dig into sources like Gabriel's giving me some books that he's interested in, wants to check out. It's like, yeah, we gotta read, and we gotta look into information on our own, and for the folks out there that have children, like, gotta get your kids out of public school. And I was talking to one of my buddies the other day, and he was telling me how they really like homeschooling their kids. It wasn't until the whole scamdemic thing happened that he was able to get his kids he was able to stay at home, and his wife, is able to work from home with what he does, and he's able to get a little bit involved in their homeschooling, but his wife sets it all up. There's like groups of other homeschoolers that are around his area, and he was telling me the other day that he wished he could have homeschooled, but back in the time when we were growing up, it probably wasn't as easily as easy to do of a thing, with his family and a lot of other families. I know my mom and dad, they both worked, and both the mom and the dad worked, and so somebody's got to watch the kids during that time, right? And so what more convenient a thing than to send them off to public school? But not the greatest for actually learning stuff. I think I remember listening to an interview with Ted Nugent one point in time, and he was saying, like, you'll have to excuse me, I didn't go to college, I was too busy learning stuff. I thought that was great, because it's so true. You learn more on your own by going to the library or getting on the internet and checking out libgen.is, and watching podcast interviews and stuff, and picking up book recommendations from podcast interviews, and just diving deep into some of the information that comes from those, and then just going and searching for the information on your own. Becomes more of a journey, and it's more exciting. It's almost like a treasure hunt, kind of going into a lot of this stuff and learning about it. So it's pretty cool. The next thing I want to figure out is how I can find all of the chats and combine the chats so that I can see people's chats from different platforms too. Even though I probably don't have any viewers on the other platforms, I'm not gonna have any in the beginning because nobody really knows about it. But as I promote it and people kind of show up, I'd like to figure out how I could integrate all the chats together, and figure that out. So that's my next piece to research, and then want to figure out maybe how to do better backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, One piece at a time. One piece at a time. All right. Let's continue with this.
Friend of his had a painting of Theodosius that I used to look at when I was a child. That's the daughter by birth.
Next call's from San Diego.
Yes, hello, Mr. Vidal. I would have to say that I hadn't really heard too much of your speaking. I've been aware of your sort of stature in the literature community, and as a child of the baby boomers, and as a product of the psychologically inadequate education that we have, unfortunately, I was just totally surprised by the shocking clarity at which you've been sort of explaining the history of the age of imperialism in the 20th century and whatnot. And I just had a quick question regarding the relationship of William Jennings Bryan that you were speaking of earlier, and the sort of how he was supported by the Greenbackers, which were linked to Lincoln's Greenback policy and that sort of idealism. And also when Woodrow Wilson, William Jennings Bryan ran last, I think in 1908, and that Woodrow Wilson, of course, in 12, and he, of course, won the election. And how Wilson, the Democratic Party that was sort of manipulated by Wall Street, when they passed the Federal Reserve, how that sort of went against everything that William Jennings Bryan thought. And perhaps, lest for wanted victory, it seems as if the Democratic Party in 1912 sold themselves out like the Republicans did after the post-Civil War era. And
Thanks.
so,
well, a lot to work with there. Thank you for the call.
Well, that's very well said. He's quite right. The Democratic Party then became part of the corporate party along with the Republican Party, and it was Wilson's election that did it. Wilson himself might not have gone that line, but Wilson fell for imperialism. Wilson was very divided about World War II, and that's where he and my grandfather parted. My grandfather had helped elect him. In fact, he was in charge of the 1912 campaign out of Chicago. And they didn't get on, but Wilson did say, not to him, but somebody else rather wistfully, he said, I wanted to be a domestic president. And here I am, a war president. And he was in favor of the war. But he said, I know at the end of this war, those great entities that I have fought, the trusts and the banks, will own the United States when this war is over, which is pretty much what happened. Apropos the caller from San Diego on William Jennings Bryan, Bryan demonstrated his anti-imperialism when Wilson got us into the war. Bryan was his Secretary of State, and Bryan resigned. I have not known any man of state ever to resign a post so high because of a disagreement over policy. But the populace, and the true Americans, I like to think of it, did not want foreign wars. They saw no point. Why on earth should we be disturbed by the Kaiser? So he wanted to have a fight with France. Let him have a fight with France. It's none of our business. And he's thought to be a buffoon, Bryan, because of the monkey trial in Tennessee. He was no fool. He was a man of principle. He had a great speech. He explained in his last speech at a convention, he said, no matter my faults, as a man and as a politician, I have kept the faith.
In these many events over these years of American history that you've chronicled, is there one that you really wish you could have been at in person?
No. First of all, if I'm in a time machine, I don't want to go anywhere where there's no anesthetic. Just forget it. I think we would be very uncomfortable in any of those past places. The one volume I would like to have written that I didn't, and it's now far too late because I can't do this sort of research anymore, but I missed out on the Mexican War. I really should have done Henry Clay and Franklin Pierce, who was a fascinating president. The most overtly, nakedly ambitious. He picks a war with Mexico in order to grab California and the whole southwest of the United States. That's a fascinating time. And Lincoln was a young politician, opposed to the war, but then went along with it. And out of it came, of course, Jefferson Davis and Ulysses Grant, who was probably our greatest prose writer. His memoirs are a masterpiece.
Wrote them penniless, isn't that right?
Dying of cancer. He'd lost all of his money in one of the crashes that Wall Street prepared. Every cent was gone. And he was leaving Julia, his wife, with no money. So he makes a deal with Mark Twain, who was also a publisher, who paid him an enormous advance. And as he died, I think he finished the book one day, got the money for his wife the next, and died.
Was it popular at the time?
Oh, yes. It's in 2 volumes. And in due course, it was disdained by literary people because he was known to have been a pretty bad president, but he was a very great general. What nobody knew, and it was Gertrude Stein, I think, first pointed it out. He wrote the best American prose. I mean, we had grander writers like Henry James, but for the plain style, it was perfect. That was what West Point did. You had to be clear. When you sent an order, send the 2nd Battalion to such and such a hill, you had to be precise. You couldn't be windy. And it's beautifully tight, austere. Rather like Julius Caesar's, except Caesar's too self-serving. Caesar is nothing but trying to convince you. It was Montaigne said about how maddening Caesar is, and he writes about his doings in the Gallic Wars. We all want to know how he was such a great general, and all he wants to do is convince us what a great engineer he was. He wastes pages after pages on how he built a bridge over a river. Grant doesn't do that. He stays with the subject.
Philadelphia next.
Hello. It's a great pleasure for me. I'm a great admirer of your works, Mr. Vidal, and of you personally. I would like to speak about Lincoln. You have aptly said that he is the tragic figure of American political history. I wonder if you could expand on your opinion of the impact of his personality, both as a president and as an American icon, in the context of your broader themes of empire and militarism. And secondly, someplace else you refer to the American Civil War as our Peloponnesian War, which I think is really a very brilliant analogy, and I wish you could expand on that. Again, it's a great pleasure to hear you. Thank you.
Well, Lincoln is the most mysterious of the presidents, and there is an air, there's a kind of megalomania about him. When he was 29, and he was a legislator in Springfield, he gave a speech to the Young Men's Lyceum, I think it was called. And it was really on power and presidential power. And I don't know it by heart. I can give you a little bit of paraphrase that he said about the man of great ambition will not be content with simply occupying the presidential chair, first occupied by Washington. He will not want to be a successor. That will not suit him, nor will it suit anyone who is of the race of the lion and the eagle. Such a man will be born, and he will seek another field. And to prevail, he could free all the slaves and enslave all free men. Now, this is Shakespeare. This is Richard III warning us against himself. And he's 29 when he gives it. And he goes on, and he takes a very odd line, because he said all along, I have no power to free the slaves. There's nothing in the presidential powers and nothing in Congress's power. Property is property, and that is, slavery is a shameful business, but I can do nothing. Then the South, being suspicious of him and the new Republican Party, full of booze and Walter Scott, decided to start seceding. And he did his best to try to hold them back, but they were going anyway. They saw the North intervening in their affairs. And he said, finally, as they finally all went, he declared war. And it was on a curious issue. Our history books teach us it was to free the slaves, the Civil War. Well, the slaves had nothing to do with it. Lincoln cooked up something that was only in his own brain, that it was to preserve the Union. And he was always eloquent, but he said, some want the Union to break, others do not. People differ. But I have an oath sworn in heaven to preserve, protect, and defend the United States of America. You will not go. I will not acknowledge that you have left. He would never say the Confederate States of America. He never acknowledged that there was any entity but one United States. He was a unionist. He was not an abolitionist. Right?
Yeah, so that's one thing that, is commonly said in the history books, is that Lincoln wanted to free the slaves. Well, yeah, that wasn't really part of his priority. He just wanted to keep the Union together and keep all the states under one rule as under one federal government. So, but that's so this is really interesting that history is a lot of bullshit. So Gabriel, the interesting thing that you're mentioning there, I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast recently where this guy was one of the only professors, I guess, that has been allowed to study psychedelic use on people. And he was talking about how his first study was funded by the Freemasons. And if you get into the information from Mark Passio, you see that in Freemasonry there are some of these rituals that he talks about in there, about like depriving yourself of light and then being introduced to light for the first time. So maybe some stuff with the pineal gland, but this guy that's been studying the use of psychedelics on people, I think they were doing some kind of study with relating to DMT and the pineal gland, and his first source of funding came from the Freemasons. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting. Let me see if I can find. Let me see if I can find that interview. I can't remember exactly the name of the guy. that he interviewed there, but it was pretty. It was a pretty good interview. They got into like DMT. Okay, yeah, Rick Strassman. So, is there a way to share this? Sure there is. Let's see. Connect to a device, blah, blah, blah. Save. Can I share this outside of Spotify? Yeah, share. Copy the episode link. Yeah. So yeah, check that one out. It was interesting. It was like the interesting part was that he received his first funding from the Freemasons to study the effects of the pineal gland and DMT. So in the interview they were talking about, and some interesting ideas came up in the interview where he was talking about how some of his theories, like they found DMT, like endogenous DMT, meaning that the thing itself creates it in many plants and animals, and of course in human beings, that we create DMT specifically like during sleep. A lot is released, I guess. It's one of the things that leads to dreams and stuff. And one of his theories is that actually our DMT system in the body is like part of a communication system between our biology and the rest of the living biology, on the planet. And it's also one of the things he was talking about is people that potentially schizophrenic people, the people that are seeing like waking hallucinations, people that aren't there, that they believe are there, and all that kind of stuff, may be having a problem regulating the DMT that their body produces or something. And so they are like, that could be why they're seeing things that other people aren't seeing, and could be an explanation for how the schizophrenia works. But they haven't been able to figure that out yet, as far as studies go, to see if that is the case. But yeah, it was one of the things he brought up there. And he was talking about how he could talk to schizophrenic people. It was like kind of easy for him to talk to schizophrenics because he's been on so many trips before. He's done a lot of hallucinogens that, and he particularly talks about kind of going too far with it, where he was losing his basically his grasp of reality. And Joe Rogan also talked about that as well, where he was in a period of basically going and taking like a lot of DMT at one point in time, and then he actually started to, what he described as reality got a little slippery, so that he didn't I guess he couldn't really like reality was kind of not what he was used to perceiving, at least. And so they were talking about, the dangers of overuse, and how it could, some of these hallucinogen psychedelics can lead to, you can abuse them, and it have negative effects on you. So I thought that was a very interesting episode, and I would tend to agree with that as well. I think it is a lot about education, and that, especially with certain psychedelic substances, that it's not helpful to do the thing on a regular basis. I think it's more to gain some kind of insight or something from it, to maybe have some introspection on your life, and maybe gain a greater awareness that you're more than the physical body, kind of thing. Give you some gratitude for your life. I think it can be helpful in the right kind of settings and stuff, around somebody that can help you, kind of like a guide. And yeah, I agree with that as well, Gabriel. Yeah, it's like a medicine for the mind. Instead of viewing it as like a party thing or something like that. You know, take I think under the right settings, and then like I said, the right folks that can help you as a guide, that it can be a helpful thing. Um, but for some, if they go and take it a lot, and you're kind of seeing it as a party thing or whatever, then I don't know if it's so helpful. So. So yeah, they talked a lot about that in that podcast. I thought it was pretty interesting, mainly because of my interest in that subject. So, um, but since you brought that up, Gabriel, about most of the presidents were Freemasons, and them talking about this study going into psychedelics and DMT's connection with the pineal gland and all that kind of stuff, being funded by the Freemasons, is interesting. And then also, I think one of the things they also brought up in that episode was how I believe it was the CIA, MK Ultra, where they were dosing people with LSD without their awareness, and then in the podcast, they were talking about how you become more suggestible during when you are under a psychedelic experience, and so it's possible to like program people once they're under this state that is induced from a hallucinogen of some kind, psychedelic of some kind, like LSD, or possibly DMT, or something like that. And supposedly with MK Ultra, they were doing that to folks, and making them more suggestible, according to this Strassman guy. He was talking about how people can become more open to certain suggestions under psychedelics. So kind of some interesting claims there about all that. I thought was pretty wild, and it kind of makes sense. Like your normal filters for your judgment and all that kind of stuff are shut off in a lot of those experiences, and so some of your maybe more logical reason type filters would be shut off in an experience like that, and you would be more open to maybe outside influences of some type and certain suggestions. I would presume kind of makes sense. Makes sense to me. So thought that was definitely interesting. So yeah, let's get into more of this Gore Vidal. I found a bunch of different books of his here, and libgen.is, and apparently he had this whole series on of history, and it was like a set of novels that go through a lot of American history. So, yeah, I wanted to look into some of that because I found this interview really fascinating. I follow Ryan Dawson, so I've already heard a lot of stuff. Like Ryan Dawson talks about how Lincoln was a freaking tyrant. You know how much of a tyrant Lincoln was. And I mean, if you go to his monument, you go to the Lincoln Memorial. We'll see if I can pull up a picture of the Lincoln Memorial. Abraham Lincoln has his hands. See if I can find the close-up of Lincoln here. So, when you look at the arms of Lincoln and you look at the columns here, these columns are what are known as fasces. Let me see if I can pull up the definition of that. Roman, I think. Yeah. I think it's spelled Fasces. So, image of the axe in the middle of the bundle of rods is a bound bundle of wooden rods, sometimes including an axe, occasionally two axes, with its blade emerging. The fascie is an Italian symbol that had its origin in the Etruscan civilization and was passed on to ancient Rome, where it symbolized a magistrate's power and jurisdiction. The axe, originally associated with the symbol the labris, the double bided axe, originally from Crete, is one of the oldest symbols of Greek civilization. To the Romans, it was known as a bipinus. The image has survived the modern world's representation of magisterial or collective power, law, and governance. So, yeah, that's interesting that the old those guys and the Lincoln has his hands over that, all that, the symbolism. Also, you can see that symbol of the fasces in the I believe in the House of Congress. That symbolism is there as well. All right, Breeze, good to see you hanging out. I appreciate you coming to chill for the show today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is over there in South Africa. All right, let's head back to old Gore Vidal here and check out a little bit more of this video.
Right or wrong is something else again. I treat him in a sympathetically in a balanced way, and sometimes rather critically, what he did. Now, I think much of his famous melancholy and so on was his knowledge that what he had done was reflective of that speech he gave as a young man at 29. He had transformed the United States from a rather loose federation of states into a tight union in which hundreds of thousands of young men had died and cities and cultures were wrecked. And he had created a bloodbath. He also made the United States the most formidable military power in the world. And I always felt, and indeed the code of my... You got Lincoln there? I'll read you the last paragraph.
I do.
I think he knew perfectly well what he had done, and I think, well, let's see what I think here. John Hay is in Paris, and he was Lincoln's secretary. And they're comparing Lincoln to Bismarck. Bismarck at the same time was doing to the German states, exact same time, who were independent, that Lincoln was doing to the American states. And I think, said Mr. Schuyler to the princess, we have here a subject, Lincoln and Bismarck, and new countries for old. And Hay says, well, it'll be interesting to see how Mr. Bismarck ends his career. Says Hay, who was now more than ever convinced that Lincoln, in some mysterious fashion, had willed his own murder as a form of atonement for the great and terrible thing that he had done by giving so bloody and absolute a rebirth to his nation.
Our next question is also about Lincoln. It's from Sacramento. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vidal. I have a quote from, I don't know where the quote comes from. It says, well, it's from Abe Lincoln. I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. Corporations have been enthroned, and an era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until all wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. Could you tell me where this comes from?
Well, it's Lincoln, all right, and it was, I can't tell you, I've forgotten.
Do you know, caller? Or are you still seeking a source?
In the newspaper.
You found it in the newspaper?
Yeah.
Well, the Lincoln style is unmistakable, so that is Lincoln. It would have been toward the end, and it probably would have been in a letter. It was never in a speech, but he would occasionally give heartfelt letters to correspondents or to little newspapers around the country, and that was his way of addressing the people and subjects that he couldn't do in the State of the Union. But this sounds like one of his meditations, which turned out to be prophetic.
In your reflection on the role of historical fiction in your newest book, The Golden Age, you tell a story about the reaction by the Lincoln Files.
The Lincoln Brigade, yeah.
Yes. Will you tell that story?
Well, which one? I've got so many stories.
Well, the one is actually about your speculation that he dosed himself.
Oh. Well, Lincoln told Herndon, who was for 17 years his law partner in Springfield, and they shared the same office, and he was the only friend I think Lincoln ever had. He had, well, in maturity, before that there was Joshua Speed, but Herndon, I don't even know if he's a friend, but the two men in an office, two lawyers practicing together. And Herndon is the best, all we have for 17 years of Lincoln's life. And some people try to rule him out because he tells things that are inconvenient. Lincoln told him how he got syphilis when he was in his late 20s. And he'd gone to a doctor in Cincinnati. Since he'd be gone to anybody in Springfield, it would have been, everybody would know. And as he said, it clung to him. He couldn't get rid of the syphilis. So he finally was cured, if you ever are, with mercury, which is very dangerous stuff to take. And it brings on all sorts of mental and physical debilities. Lincoln was very odd at times, and it conforms. I have a Dr. Hirschhorn, I think he is, who writes me occasionally. He's doing a study of Lincoln's syphilis, rather the treatment for it, which is mercury. Did he have mercury poisoning? And there are a great many of his symptoms, the melancholy, and they suddenly would be talking to him, and he'd just stare off into space and not hear you. And hideous nightmares. He would wake up screaming in the night in the White House. And there's a good case to be made that indeed he had mercury poisoning. But at one point,
that brings up something that was in the back of my mind. There was this guy, I think his name is Hahnemann, but I believe he was the, let me see, homeopathy. I think it's spelled A. Hahnemann. Homeopathy. Yeah. Samuel Hahnemann. And I remember hearing a story of this, especially the case for syphilis that he mentioned that Lincoln may have had, and was taking possibly taking mercury to cure it. And apparently they were doing this to a lot of the sailors were getting syphilis, and they were doing exactly that. They were like, they figured out that mercury cured syphilis, reversed it, but everybody would get mercury poisoning, and it would be a really bad day. But apparently this guy Hahnemann, he took like vials in just like super low trace, like put mercury in the vials, I guess, and then like rasped it against like books or something like that. And then basically he would just like empty it of the mercury. He would dilute it with water. He would continue that process of like shaking against a book, or like basically taking the file and like hitting against like a book or something like that. And then like continuously diluting it so that I guess there would be literally like no mercury in the vial, but it contained water that had the information of mercury in it. And this was his kind of discovery and the start of the start of homeopathy. And I guess he was doing this kind of stuff for treating guys with syphilis. And anyway, this was let's read a little bit of this this is from Wikipedia, but let's see. That just triggered my memory on that from checking out somebody else's kind of talk on that. Following up the work with Viennese physician Anton von Storck, Hahnemann tested substances for the effects they produce on a healthy individual, presupposing, as Storck had claimed, that they may heal the same ills that they caused. His researches led him to agree with von Storck that toxic effects of ingested substances are often broadly parallel to certain disease states, and his exploration of historical cases of poisoning in the medical literature further implied a more generalized medicinal law of similars. He later devised methods of diluting the drugs he was testing in order to mitigate their toxic effects. He claimed that these dilutions, when prepared according to his technique of potentiation, using dilution and succussion, vigorous shaking, were still effective in alleviating the same symptoms in the sick. His more systemic experiments with dose reduction really commenced around 1800 to 1801, when on the basis of his law of similars he had begun using lepicana for the treatment of coughs and belladonna for scarlet fever. I have no idea what those are. He first published an article about homeopathic approach in the German language medical journal in 1796. Following a series of further essays he published in 1810, Organon of the Rational Art of Healing, followed over the years by 4 further editions entitled The Organon of the Healing Art, the first systemic treatise and containing all his detailed instructions on the subject, a 6th Organon edition unpublished during his lifetime and dating from February 1842, was only published many years after his death. It consisted of a 5th Organon containing extensive handwritten annotations. The Organon is widely regarded as a remodeled form of an essay he published in 1806 called The Medicine Experience, which had been published in Hoffman's Journal of the Organon. Robert Ellis Dudgeon states it was an amplification and extension of his Medicine of Experience, worked up with greater care and put into a more methodical and aphoristic form after the model of the Hippocratic writings. Anyway, yeah, so this guy, Hahnemann, was studying how they could use certain toxic things and then dilute them down and still reproduce some of the same effects that they were getting from administering some of these toxic substances to people that were causing all kinds of other bad side effects. So thought that was interesting. But apparently, or possibly, Lincoln was driven mad by dosing himself with mercury. This somewhat supposes, because apparently he had syphilis.
He took something called blue pills, a purge for constipation, which had mercury in it also. And finally, he's getting worried about it because he knows something is going wrong, so he talks to the doctor about it. And he figures out he'll stop taking these purges, and he did, and he became pretty healthy again. Well, all of this was quite well. The Lincoln Brigade, a great man, has syphilis with a girl in Ohio. Oh, maggoty, said one great historian. This is a maggoty story. Well, it's an essential story. It has to do with the health and mind of a president. Forget his sex life. Why cover it up? And that's what they do. And one of the best results of my Lincoln, which has been formidably successful with the public, and now with many scholars, I'm really giving it to the Lincoln Brigade, who keep trying to falsify them. Far more to the point than that is that Lincoln, I'm convinced, to the day he went to Ford's Theater, still wanted to colonize the freed slaves at the South. In Central America, he'd already got hold of some land down there, which is now near Nicaragua, or over in Liberia. He said he wanted to do that in his first State of the Union, and then he sort of dropped it in public, and in due course he freed the slaves in the South during the war, but not the ones in the North, from the border states, which he could have done, but he didn't do that because he needed the white vote there. So basically, this was his plan, because he kept saying, he rationalized it. He said, these are 3 million people who have been held in terrible slavery. They are without education, they are without skills, and so on. And he got a bunch of free black men from New York to try to persuade their cousins in the South to go to Liberia. And one of them said to Lincoln, I have all this in the book, he said, why do you think they can't support themselves when they have supported themselves and their masters in considerable luxury for the last 200 years? Well, he didn't have much of an answer for that one. And finally they said, well, you know, this is our country. We've been here as long as you have. We see no reason that we should go off to the jungles of Africa. Now, the latest word from the Lincoln Brigade is that Lincoln did have the notion, but gave it up after his first year in office. Well, this ignores John Hay, his young secretary's diary. When he writes his colleague, Nicolay, he said, the Ancient was their code name for it. The Ancient, I think, this is August 1864, I think has given up his harebrained notion to ship all the slaves out of the South. At last, he's been convinced by something had gone wrong. Then General Ben Butler, in his memoir, unsavory figure, but he says that Lincoln before had brought up the subject again in the early spring before Ford's Theater of 65 about colonizing them elsewhere. So one very clever historian came up with the fact that Secretary Stanton, Secretary of War, had said no general officer could come to town without permission, fearing a coup, I think. And Butler couldn't have been in Washington, to which my answer is nobody told General Butler what to do. If he wanted to come, he came. And if Lincoln had said that to him, why not? Now, this is the extent to which, in the age of Martin Luther King, the white historians have gone out of their minds trying to readjust history. And this has been one of the great spurs for me to write these books. I can't bear the falsifications.
Yeah, it's funny because Abraham Lincoln's seen as this great hero to the black population when, he was most likely trying to ship all the black people over back to freaking ship them all back to Africa, I guess. So yeah, Lincoln was a piece of shit.
The data is pretty clear. They have to twist themselves into knots and history. So it has finally come to this, that if you want the real truth of the situation, you must turn to a novel, and you must reject the court historians who are there to falsify.
Take one last question before a brief break, and it'll be from Chicago. You're on the air.
Yes, Mr. Vidal, an honor, sir.
Thank you.
There were so many questions to ask, but here's the one I'm going to ask, and it's a what-if question. If Burr had remained politically viable after the duel, or if Hamilton had not died, because of their military capabilities, do you believe the early course of the War of 1812 might have been different? For example, could we have acquired Canada, etc.?
Well, as you know, if you read me on the subject, whenever in doubt, we invade Canada. At the time of the Revolution, when the British occupied, I think they'd already occupied New York and Philadelphia, first thing General Washington does at Lexington is send Benedict Arnold and Aaron Burr up to Canada, to Montreal, to Quebec, rather, to conquer Canada. They failed. At the time of the War of 1812, one of the first moves made was to invade Canada. This is when the British were burning down the White House, and they'd taken Washington. We didn't care about that. We wanted Canada. I think had Burr and Hamilton, not one dead and the other under a cloud, I think we would have been more militaristic. Burr always, I'll tell you who drove these two men. Remember, they're both 5'4" or 5. Was Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1800, when Burr became vice president, Napoleon was, about to be Emperor of France and going to conquer Europe. Both Hamilton and Burr had their eye on Mexico, and where the Spanish were, and the Mexicans didn't like the Spanish. And Hamilton was dealing with one group of indigenous Mexicans, for want of a better word, to get the Spanish out. And Burr was also maneuvering to make himself emperor of Mexico after he ceased to be vice president and was under a murder charge up in New York. So he goes down the Mississippi with a little army, all prepared to invade Mexico and take over. Gets a lot of help, moral help, certainly from Andrew Jackson, and Henry Clay. This was the bum rap that President Jefferson put on Burr. He said Burr wants to separate the western states from the eastern. He didn't. He wanted to go down the Mississippi, go to New Orleans, go over to Mexico, and make himself emperor. So Jefferson arrested him for treason, which he had not committed, and it was a bum rap, and everybody knew it, and he was exonerated. But your what-if question, yes, I think that had Burr gone on to be president, which was the original arrangement with Jefferson, though Jefferson was a noble but sly and devious man. And I must say, Richard M. Nixon, who had the most wonderful unconscious mind, says in Six Crises, General Eisenhower was a far more sly and devious man than people suspected, and I mean that in the best sense of those words. I agree with our caller here that the War of 1812 might have ended with an invasion of Mexico and of Canada.
Our conversation with Gore Vidal is just halfway over. We're going to take a break of about 5 minutes in length. During that, we'll show you some upcoming programming here on Book TV on C-SPAN 2, and then we'll be back for a second 90 minutes of in-depth conversation.
So I wrote a comedy about it, which I thought the subject deserved. I myself have become serious.
That was interesting that he talked about how apparently Aaron Burr may have went on to invade Mexico. It's a possibility. And Canada, I guess, as well. So yeah, let's continue on with this.
Well, I wouldn't say agnostic. I think I'm closer to atheist, but I love Christian quarreling, and I wrote a book called Julian, about Julian the Apostate, 4th century emperor, who tried to stop Christianity in its tracks. And that was favorable to the Emperor Julian and not so favorable to the bishops that he went to war against.
I think what we're going to do, your technology is not quite, we're not able to connect it. So we've got a speaker in here. You're just not plugged in. We didn't do that after our break. So we'll have to listen to the next call on speaker and make sure you can hear. Las Vegas, you are on the...
The first one is, what caused or prompted you to write Life from Golgotha? And just as a comment, the book doesn't leave the Christian faithful with much awe about the centerpiece object, i.e. the sine qua non of their faith.
Okay, did you understand the question?
I didn't hear a word.
You didn't hear a word. You know you are not plugged in. I'm going to ask our technician to plug you in while I repeat the question.
Okay, sure.
Thanks very much. The question is about the book, Live from Golgotha,
Yep.
and wanted to know what prompted you, and her observation was that it doesn't leave those of the Christian faith with much about the centerpiece event.
Well, it is, after all, a satiric work on the founder of Christianity, who was, of course, not Jesus, but St. Paul. And it has theology in it is not bad. And it's basically anti-Pauline, that he reinvented Jesus, who intended himself only for the Jews as a possible Jewish Messiah. And Paul wanted to make him international for everybody. And that was a distortion of the original Christian message to the extent that we understand it at all. So I wrote a comedy about it, which I thought the subject deserved. I myself have become seriously, well, I wouldn't say agnostic. I think I'm closer to atheist, but I love Christian quarreling, and I wrote a book called Julian, about Julian the Apostate, 4th century emperor, who tried to stop Christianity in its tracks. And that was favorable to the Emperor Julian and not so favorable to the bishops that he went to war against.
I think what we're going to do, your technology...
Yeah, that is something, for myself as being raised Catholic, that looking into how they started the Catholic Church and the Council of Nicaea, where Constantine called this council of bishops together and to basically come up with a uniform way or uniform idea of Christianity, and then distributing that into the world. It seems more like a control mechanism for the folks in power that were losing control of the empire and needed to shift to the hearts and minds, so to say, of control instead of the over control with the state now turning into a theological or a control over the spiritual aspects, but still in control of people's minds. It's very interesting looking into some of that as well. So, I found that was an interesting comment, Tim, talking about how, the version of Christianity that people see is one dude's interpretation of what he was talking about. So so that was kind of interesting as well.
Technology is not quite, we're not able to connect it. So we've got a speaker in here. You're just not plugged in. We didn't do that after our break. So we'll have to listen to the next call on speaker and make sure you can hear. Las Vegas, you are on the air. Welcome. We don't hear the speaker right here. Las Vegas, go ahead, please. Las Vegas, go ahead.
Hi, Susan, and hi, Mr. Vidal. I'm a great admirer of yours, especially because of your frankness with which you express yourself. And I enjoyed your monograph you did for Odonian Press about the American presidency. So I had a couple of questions. First, what American presidents, if any, do you admire or did you admire? And would you say a few words about Noam Chomsky, most of whose books I have and whom I also admire very much? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, of admirable presidents, it's very hard to separate them from the times in which they lived. Some very marvelous men have been forgotten because they were not in interesting times. I would say that, well, John Quincy Adams, I suppose. He served only one term, which was not successful. But I quoted from him earlier as an anti-imperialist. He also, when he was Secretary of State, he wrote the Monroe Doctrine, which has President Monroe's name, but it was his work. He was the first person, perhaps the last American president, to understand foreign affairs and what America's role should be, which was do business with everybody, have no special friends, no special enemies, no prejudices, and certainly not be the world's policeman. So I suppose J.Q. Adams. Noam Chomsky and I are allies. We do the same sort of thing, but often with the same sort of audiences. We did an anti-Gulf War half-hour discussion for some independent, at the time, television people. No one, the two of us with an interlocutor, no one would put it on the air. Not even at 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning in San Francisco would they put it on air. I've never seen such fear across the land.
I wish you'd called us. We would have aired it.
Were you around at the time of
the Gulf War? Yes.
Gulf War? Well, I think we must have, because the guy who produced it certainly was very busy with it. And we had a good team from ABC who did it for nothing, just pro bono publico. Chomsky and I, of course, we have the same enemies. By your enemies, one is celebrated, largely the New York Times. And there's a funny story of Chomsky. He went to the dentist, and the dentist said, your teeth are all right, but you've got to stop grinding them. He said, I don't grind my teeth. He said, well, you do. The enamel is worn off. Well, I don't. So Mrs. Chomsky was there, and he asked this, well, when he sleeps, does he grind his teeth? He said, oh, no, he doesn't grind his teeth. Well, they both got terribly interested. When did it happen? Well, they finally found out that in the morning while having coffee, and she might be out of the room, he would start to read the New York Times, and his teeth would... Mine grind, too, when I read that paper, particularly the things they do to that scientist at Los Alamos, or their invention of the Whitewater plot. It's a bad paper.
New Orleans next for Gore Vidal.
Yes, I love your books. I keep rereading, as a matter of fact, and one of the things that strikes me is that your work changes over the years. I mean, not my interpretation of your work changes over the years. For example, Messiah was that kind of book for me. It meant different things to me as different events took place in the country. But the thing I'm interested in now is Lincoln. I'm rereading Lincoln, and one of the things I wanted to know, now that Dutch came out, is there any difference other than that ideology between your method and Edmund Morris's?
Okay, thanks for the call. Actually, would you speak a bit about Messiah before we turn to...
Yeah, Messiah came out. I had a period after The City and the Pillar when the New York Times book reviewer, Orville Prescott, and he was very powerful, he did about 5 daily reviews a week, told my publisher that not only would he never review a book by me, but he'd never read one. So I published 7 books that were never reviewed in the Daily New York Times, or by Time, or by Newsweek. This was a blackout. All because I had said in The City and the Pillar about the normality of a relation between two all-American boys, and I was the war novelist, etc., who was pronouncing upon this heresy. The 7th of the books that were not reviewed by the New York Times was Messiah. And it came out invisibly because you get no press, particularly if the Times will not look at it, or the news magazines. But something odd happened. It's about a man who sort of says he's a messiah, or people say he is. And his message is that death is no thing, therefore nothing can not be a bad thing. And in selling that, it becomes a sort of cult, which finally ends, a lot of it's been lifted from movies. Soylent Green stole a wonderful piece of it, where people go to commit suicide, to these comforting places, and you lie and you look at a screen and you see movies or whatever. Well, the book became a cult book. In no time at all, more and more people started to read it and hand it around. And I was fascinated by the diversity of those who were drawn to this thing. On another level, it showed how easily through television that you could create a religion, how quickly. It took Christianity centuries to take over Europe, and he does it in 2 or 3 years. Then at the end, of course, they want him to commit suicide, as he's encouraged others to do. And he doesn't want to, so they have to kill him and pretend that he killed himself, as death is no thing. And why it's because to this day is selling, and or at least it has not a great seller, but it has its devotees.
If television can so quickly create messiahs, why have we not seen them in the television age?
Well, we do. We see their spokespersons, the Jerry Falwell, Oral Roberts, Billy Graham. They're making a lot of money out of being professional prophets. It is, now that you've asked that question, that's an interesting one. It hasn't occurred to me why somebody hasn't used it to start a new religion. Well, Scientology. I don't know if they've used television, but they've certainly made themselves into a religion. From a book by a science fiction writer of the 50s. We had the same publisher for Messiah that L. Ron Hubbard had for Dianetics. I guess that's the case, but not TV. You'd have to have a charismatic type. So far, they wrap themselves in Jesus or Sing My Way on television.
Flanders, New Jersey, you're next.
Yes, Mr. Vidal, an honor, sir. 2 questions. First, what do you see the trajectory of the novel being in the next century? And second, can any amount of pleading on my behalf convince you to write an 8th book in the series?
Well, plead some more. I might go back to 1846, but I don't see myself doing the Kennedy years or anything closer, because if I did it, having been involved, I would probably have to do another memoir to cover it, which might be the way of doing it, and I might yet do that. The novel is going through a strange patch. It's become academicized. Most of the writers, and certainly practically all of the reviewers, seem to be English teachers. I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. You can make books out of books. Writers have always done it or been inclined to do it, but anterior to literature is something called life. And if you haven't had a life, it is a really involved one. Even if it's just simply an inner life sitting by a pond in New England, you're not going to be very interesting. And that to me is a problem that the writers now working, particularly the ones who are school teachers in universities, they've had so little experience of the world. And there's so much they've shut out. Mary McCarthy was wonderful on this. She made a list of all the things that a novelist may not do, a novelist who's considered serious. You can't have a sunset. You can't have an election. You can't have a really good dinner party. You can't have, and she just made this list of all the things which had made classic fiction great, had been carefully put away. Oh no, that would be corny. Oh, we don't know enough about elections. Have a president in the book? How can you write about, what are you, some sort of fantasist? You don't know any presidents. They pride themselves on the fact that they go to school, they stay in school, they get tenure, and some may have a real talent for writing. But
I think this was actually from 2000. Because I think this happened before 9/11 in 2001. This interview specifically. Let's see. At least that's in the title of this, 2000. But yeah, I mean, they had a lot of really good questions from the people in the audience. People that you could tell were, seeking truth and had run across his books in some fashion or another and were on their own path of seeking truth. It's like the early people that were on the internet. It's like, I think, in the 90s and stuff, when people were first getting online, people were doing a lot of, probably some people were doing extra research that they were helped or empowered by the internet to do. So, could explain it.
But there must be a little spark, which is known as life, to set you going. I had a fairly interesting life, and certainly 3 years of the Army gave me an awful lot to write about. So the trajectory, I don't think, is very promising. People who want narratives, who want to be amused by stories, are now video cassettes. I find something very odd going wrong with people who use computers. Now, maybe it's the people, or maybe it's just my inability to understand, but I think the prose is flattening out. I can tell computer prose very often now, particularly when the same paragraph occurs 3 times in 2 pages, and I know it's a computer on a blink. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think that the only form of prose that is going to last is the essay. People need that. It's short. It's one man's voice making connection with another person's eyes. It is, suddenly you've got Montaigne from 500 years ago, and he's talking to you as though you're in the room, and you can respond to him. So really the kinetic energy is so great between the great essayists and the readers.
Well, speaking of
that's kind of interesting because Twitter, I don't know what the formal length of an essay is, but I mean, kind of Twitter is kind of like that. And they were talking about how Elon Musk was so interested in the acquisition of Twitter. Now looks like that he's probably backed out of that, but because of the text format of Twitter, you can store a lot of data. It'd probably be good for like interplanetary communications, kind of being able to send data packets that aren't incredibly large and all that kind of stuff. In just the basic text format of Twitter, and it is short form. So so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely probably an essay is probably something like maybe a paragraph or something like that. Let's see, what's the formal definition of an essay? Formal definition. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting insight by this Gore Vidal guy. Apparently, he was in the army for a little while as well. Let's see. So the concept of an essay has been extended to other media beyond writing. A film essay, blah blah blah, photographic essay. Generally, a piece of writing that gives the author its own argument, but the definition is vague, overlapping with those of a letter, a paper, an article, a pamphlet, and a short story. Essays have been subclassified as formal and informal. Formal essays are characterized by serious purpose, dignity, local organization, length, whereas informal essays characterized by personal elements, self-revelation, individual tastes and experiences, confidential manner, human grace, blah blah blah. Doesn't really say anything about says while brevity usually defines an essay, voluminous works like John Locke's an essay concerning human understanding, and Thomas Malthus an essay on the principle of population are counter examples. There you go, where everybody got the idea that we're overpopulated there from old Thomas Malthus, I believe. So yeah, that's funny. Gabriel, probably before corn syrup and all the fluoridated water. But yeah, supposedly the date is on there from this interview is in 2000, but I'm not exactly sure. It looks like it could have been video from 2000. But I don't know. I don't know entirely. But we got a few minutes left, a couple minutes left on the podcast. Appreciate you guys coming by and checking it out for this week. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Everybody has a productive rest of your week. And I will report back on some of the knives. I ordered them from a place that was going to ship them, I think, from because it had to convert from Swiss francs or something to US dollars. So I think it was actually shipping overseas, but I got the free shipping with the knife set that I bought. So and it was going to end up being cheaper than buying it on Amazon, and I don't like supporting Amazon. So anyway, I bought it from overseas, I guess, and then they're going to ship it to me. But it said something about probably like 4 weeks before they get here. So it's going to be a while till I get those knives and that knife set, but I am excited about getting them. So thank you guys for hanging out. Ron, Crimson, Gabriel, Breeze, here for a little while. So appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful week, and keep working towards your own self-reliance and kicking ass in this world. I appreciate it, guys. Love y'all. We'll see you guys later. And to many to many great things in the future. Stay optimistic. Keep crushing it in your daily lives. This is Greg from Meadows and Makers Podcast signing off. Peace out, guys.